So hi, I'm Sarah Bolton. I'm in the physics department and I've been here since 1995, which means I've been teaching for, I believe, 13 or 14 years. And I'd like to talk a little bit about lecturing, in particular, what makes lecturing hard, or maybe what makes lecturing well hard, and a few things that I've encountered that help me give lectures that I'm a little happier with, or meet some of those challenges. So first let me say, what am I trying to do when I'm giving a lecture? What feels like giving a good lecture to me? So there are a couple of things that I hope to do. One is to convey and hopefully bring students along with a little bit of the excitement and the beauty of my subject, which is physics, a subject with a reputation for being hard and extremely boring. So, you know, we try to go in a different direction. A second piece of a good lecture, I think, is one in which the students get to try out and practice some of the new ideas and applying them to questions that they haven't tried before. So they get to test themselves a little bit, they get to learn a little bit about both why the ideas are beautiful, what kinds of new questions they might enable them to ask, and what might be the challenges in applying those techniques to a set of new questions. And the third thing that I hope happens in all of my lectures is that the students will somehow view me, although I'm old and I talk fast and I listen to bad music, that they'll somehow view me as an ally as they try to learn these challenging ideas. So what does it feel like when I walk out of a lecture that I think went well? What makes me feel like it went well? So it is if we've laughed a little bit, if sometimes I see the students smiling as I'm developing an idea because they can sort of see where we're going and it's exciting and it's new and we're all grinning at the end, me as well as them, because we've come to something beautiful. It's a lecture where a couple of people asked a question. Now, I sometimes teach 100 students and I don't expect all 100 students to ask a question, but if a couple of people asked a question, or I read a couple of faces and said, hey, you have something that's bothering you, and I was right and they were willing to talk about it, that's good. And then I think also a lecture where I said things in a way that seemed to bring people along, where the ways I ended up deciding to lay out the material were ways that seemed to bring students along. And so what makes that difficult? That sounds pretty simple. So what makes that difficult? So there's a couple things that make it difficult. So first I'll blame somebody else. What are the things that make it difficult? So first of all, I teach this subject that a lot of people have heard is really hard, have heard only a few people like, and have heard is extremely boring. And many of the students who take my classes have to take them, for example, for medical school, and know that this is the class they were least looking forward to in their entire college career. So that's one challenge. Another inherent challenge of lectures is that many students will never feel comfortable raising their hand or asking a question or posing a challenge in front of 50 or 60 or 70 other students. They simply will not ever feel glad about doing that. And a third challenge has to do with me, which is that I am basically kind of a shy and nervous person. And so although I've been doing this for 13 or 14 or 15 years, I still get nervous at the beginning of every semester. I still have to talk myself into that room at the beginning of every class, and it's still pretty easy for me to get nervous or frazzled or jangled at the front of the room if things aren't going well. And so I say that in part just to convey the idea that, you know, there may be people who are natural teachers, I'm not sure, but I don't think that it's the case that there are a set of people who are magically able to teach well and that everybody else is just out of luck. I think there are a lot of ways that you can kind of bridge that gap, figure out where your own strengths and challenges are, and try to do something about it. And that's actually a lot like teaching people physics, because a lot of people think being able to do physics is a magical gift that some people have and other people just don't have. And so a lot of what I do with my students is try to say to them, hey, you know, you can all learn to do this. Here are some techniques, here are some things to try. Okay, oh, and then one other challenge, which is that the subject I teach happens to be a little technical, a little bit mathematical, and that the students who come in have a huge range of backgrounds. So some of them find it very easy, Some of them find it pretty hard. Some of them done a lot before, and some have never done it before. And the idea is that you'd like to bring everybody along and have everybody learn something and have everybody be excited. So what do I do? So the thing that I do is I practice a lot. And you might say, well, that is a really boring technique. Why would you want to practice a lot? Well, here are a couple of reasons. One of the things is that if I have a set of students, some of whom find the material very easy and some of whom find the material very hard, I might think, well, I should slow down. I should give a really slow lecture where I repeat the main ideas a lot of times in order that the people for whom this is new and who are having a challenging time with it get it. Of course, the problem there is that a bunch of other students will be really, really bored and they may actually stop coming, which would be too bad. So instead of doing that, what can I do? So what I try to do instead of slowing down is to be really, really clear. I think for a really long time, exactly how will I explain this idea? I might have 5 or 6 different ways that I could come upon the idea, that I could explain it, that I could lay it out physically on the board. And I'll often try them all out, like physically on my own blackboard in my own office, and actually try saying the words I'm thinking and see which one of these is efficient, which one of these is clear, which one of these does not require you to have secret understandings from someplace else, but still gets you to someplace that's exciting and new. So I don't necessarily actually try to slow down for students who are struggling. I try to think harder about what is the clearest possible way that I can come to this new idea so that we can all get to it together, whether or not we're struggling with the math, and then we can all go on and do something exciting with it, with everybody on the bus. And that literally often means that I practice, like, should I write this equation in 2 lines? Should I make this picture this big? Should I make it these parts blue and these parts green? And I practice it really carefully and try out different ways until I'm doing it in a way that I feel like is saying exactly what I want to say and not saying a whole lot of extra stuff, because I want to be going on to the next place. So that's part of what I do. And the harder the idea is, the more I actually worry about practicing it. And part of what practicing also does for me is it means that I've thought carefully about exactly what I want to be doing in the lecture. And so once I've arrived in the room and I'm doing it on the board, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know as I'm writing down the numbers, yeah, that's the right number, and this is exactly where I want to stop, and this is what I want this to look like. And so it means I can stop thinking about that while I'm in the room and be fully present for the students. So I have planned what I'm going to do, I'm doing it, and that means that I'm not looking at my notes. I'm not looking at the floor, which is what I do when I make mistakes, just so you know. I'm not looking at the floor. I'm looking at the students. So I'm watching their faces, and I do that enough that I get a sense of what different people look like when they're following, or when they're confused, or when they're upset or bored or have a question. I actually know that even in a class of 40 or 50 students, because I spend most of my lecture looking out at them and trying to read how they're responding. So that I feel like that preparation actually allows me to be present to them in a way that I couldn't be if I was trying to figure out in real time, what am I doing? Another thing that it helps with, and this is something that took me a couple of years to figure out when I first got here, is that for students who are struggling with the material, the experience of me stumbling around on the board is much more problematic than it is for students for whom it's easy. If I make a mistake on the board and someone already knows where I'm going, they might bother to correct me and they might not. And either way, they're going to write down what they know is right and they just go on. But for somebody who's barely hanging on, who's never heard about this before, who's really struggling, if I get something wrong or turn it upside down, it can completely disconnect them from everything I say after that. They're trying to figure out why they don't understand, they're trying to figure out why it doesn't seem to make sense, which is of course because I screwed up, but they don't know that. They're trying to, and then they say, oh, well, I don't really trust you, I can't quite trust what you're putting on the board, and I don't understand this is all very muddled and confusing, I give up. And so I try really hard, it's not that I don't make mistakes, but I try really hard not to do that because I realize how unhinging it can be for people. And by the way, when I do make that mistake, I actually do write down corrections and make them into a PDF and send them out to everybody afterwards so that it's really clear what happened. People do different things, but that's what I do. So anyway, so I guess part of what I'm trying to do when I give a lecture is stay connected to this room full of people, even though they're not necessarily all going to talk to me or all going to ask questions. And part of the way I do that is just by practicing a lot and listening to myself do it. And oftentimes I don't know what's going to be clear and what's going to be a mess until I actually hear myself say it out loud. So I close my door and people hear me mumbling in the hall, and I guess that's okay.